In the heart of a nation at war, a political storm is brewing. A former Ukrainian Prime Minister, Yulia Tymoshenko, is accused of attempting to bribe politicians with US dollars to undermine President Zelensky's government. This isn't just a story about corruption. It's a tale of power, manipulation, and betrayal at a critical time in Ukraine's history. Imagine stacks of US dollars being passed behind closed doors, a secretive network of lawmakers working against the very government they swore to serve. What is the real cost of these political games? And what does this scandal mean for Ukraine's future? As the investigation unfolds, the world is watching. But behind the headlines, the question remains, can Ukraine rid itself of this poison before it destroys everything? Let's take a closer look at how this scandal came to light and what it means for the people of Ukraine. It all began on January 13th, when Ukraine's National Anti-Corruption Bureau, UNACB, confirmed they had uncovered a plot to bribe lawmakers. The leader of an unnamed parliamentary faction allegedly offered illegal benefits to politicians, with the goal of weakening Zelensky's control over his government. In a dramatic turn, video footage was released showing stacks of US dollars seized during overnight raids, allegedly linked to Yulia Tymoshenko. The cash, reportedly around $40,000, was allegedly intended to buy votes against the president's legislative agenda. Lawmakers, including those from Zelensky's own faction, were said to be involved in these backdoor deals. This raises a troubling question: is Ukraine facing a crisis of political corruption that threatens its stability at the worst possible time? To understand the gravity of this situation, let's explore the historical context that has shaped Ukraine's current political environment. Ukraine's political landscape has always been shaped by external pressures and internal divisions. From its struggles for independence to the revolutionary tides of the 2004 Orange Revolution, the country's path to democracy has been anything but smooth. The system is a delicate balance between the president and parliament, with each vying for control. Historically, corruption has run deep in Ukrainian politics, often destabilizing governments and undermining reform efforts. For decades, politicians have leveraged power for personal gain, turning political loyalty into a commodity. The mechanisms of this corruption are well known, from cash-filled envelopes to clandestine deals brokered behind closed doors. Yet the stakes today are higher than ever. With Russia's invasion hanging over the nation, the need for unity and strong leadership is paramount, and yet political infighting and corruption continue to threaten that very unity. Now let's examine the first crisis that erupted as a result of this ongoing struggle for power. The discovery of the bribery plot has shaken Ukraine's political landscape to its core. It wasn't just a whisper in the halls of power, it was a full-blown crisis. As law enforcement uncovered the stacks of US dollars in raids, the implications were clear: a coordinated effort to undermine President Zelensky's government. The fact that this was orchestrated by a former Prime Minister, Yulia Tymoshenko, a woman with decades of political influence, makes it even more troubling. Tymoshenko, who has long been a fixture in Ukrainian politics, was allegedly behind the scheme to offer lawmakers $10,000 a month in exchange for their votes against the president. This wasn't just about a few lawmakers swayed by cash. It was an attempt to fracture the ruling coalition and weaken Zelensky's mandate at a time when unity is critical. The political fallout was immediate. Tymoshenko's office was raided, and her supporters rallied, calling it a politically motivated attack. But the question lingers: who else is involved in this hidden network of corruption? Behind these actions lies a deeper, more complex mechanism, one that has allowed corruption to thrive for so long. At the heart of this bribery plot lies a complex web of political maneuvering and corruption that has been entrenched in Ukraine's system for years. The mechanism is simple yet dangerous. Money flows in exchange for power. In Ukraine's parliamentary presidential republic, the president relies on a fragile majority in parliament to pass legislation. Control over this majority is crucial. Tymoshenko's alleged attempt to sway votes with cash wasn't just about undermining Zelensky's legislative proposals, it was about fracturing the entire system. The hidden system of political patronage in Ukraine means that laws can be bought and sold, with lawmakers acting as pawns in a high-stakes game. This isn't a new phenomenon, it's a pattern that stretches back decades. However, what makes this case particularly alarming is the timing. With Ukraine's war with Russia ongoing, any effort to weaken the president's power could have dire consequences for national security and the country's ability to respond to external threats. Yet, this was just the beginning. The situation would escalate further, leading to an even more intense political showdown. As the investigation unfolded, the political storm in Ukraine reached a new intensity. Reports surfaced of lawmakers from Zelensky's own faction allegedly seeking out Tymoshenko for deals, a shocking revelation that deepened the crisis. These weren't just rogue politicians acting alone. It appeared to be a coordinated effort, one aimed at breaking the unity of the ruling government. With the country at war, such actions posed a direct threat to Ukraine's ability to govern effectively. The stakes couldn't be higher. In a system already weakened by corruption, the notion that members of the president's own faction could betray him for personal gain left many wondering who can be trusted. As the scandal spread, calls for greater transparency and accountability grew louder. But the damage was done. Zelensky's grip on the majority in parliament was slipping, and with it his power to push forward essential reforms. What started as a few whispers behind closed doors had now erupted into a full-blown political crisis with far-reaching consequences for Ukraine's future. In the end, it's not just the politicians who are caught in this web. The people of Ukraine will feel the effects of this crisis in ways we can't yet imagine. The consequences of this corruption scandal are far-reaching, and the people of Ukraine are at the heart of it. For ordinary citizens, it's a painful reminder of the pervasive corruption that has plagued the country for years. As they struggle to survive in a war-torn nation, the sight of their leaders being bought and sold for political gain strikes at the very core of their trust in government. The sums involved may seem modest compared to other corruption scandals, but the impact is profound. For Ukrainians already facing hardships from the ongoing war with Russia to the economic crisis, the revelation that their leaders are prioritizing personal gain over national unity is a bitter blow. The political elite's betrayal is a direct assault on the people's hopes for a better, more transparent future. And yet, despite the disappointment, there is a sense of resolve. Ukrainians have fought long and hard for their independence, and now more than ever, they are ready to fight against the corruption that threatens to tear their nation apart. The effects of this scandal aren't confined to Ukraine alone. The ripple effects are being felt across the globe. The corruption scandal in Ukraine isn't just a domestic issue, it has international implications that could affect Ukraine's relationships on the global stage. As the country fights a brutal war with Russia, the international community has been watching closely, offering aid and support to help Ukraine maintain its sovereignty. However, incidents like this one erode the trust that foreign governments and institutions have in Ukraine's leadership. Corruption undermines the legitimacy of the Ukrainian government, potentially jeopardizing the flow of international aid and political support. Western allies, including the United States and European Union, have made it clear that their continued support depends on Ukraine's ability to root out corruption and demonstrate a commitment to reform. The timing of this scandal could not be worse as Ukraine's enemies watch eagerly for any signs of instability. This internal betrayal threatens to weaken Ukraine's position on the global stage. In a world where geopolitics is often driven by power and perception, this crisis could lead to consequences far beyond Ukraine's borders. As we look toward the future, it's essential to consider what comes next for Ukraine. What paths lie ahead? As Ukraine grapples with the fallout from this corruption scandal, the future is uncertain. 3 possible scenarios are emerging, each with its own set of risks and rewards. The optimistic scenario: Ukraine manages to clean house, rooting out corruption within its government. The public, outraged by the scandal, demands accountability, and the leadership rises to the occasion. With a restored political system, Ukraine's governance strengthens, its international allies rally in support, and the war effort against Russia gains momentum. In this scenario, Ukraine becomes a model of resilience, overcoming internal challenges to solidify its position on the world stage. The middle ground. While efforts are made to address corruption, the process is slow and fragmented. Political infighting continues, but a majority of Ukrainians remain committed to the fight against corruption. Ukraine remains dependent on foreign aid and international support, but the political instability hampers its ability to enact swift reforms. This middle ground scenario leaves Ukraine in a delicate balance, struggling with both internal and external pressures. The pessimistic scenario, the corruption scandal deepens, fracturing Ukraine's political system beyond repair. Lawmakers continue to betray the public trust, and foreign support dwindles as Ukraine becomes further mired in political chaos. In this worst-case scenario, the government's ability to function effectively collapses, leading to a loss of control and the potential for even greater instability. In any case, the next steps will be crucial. Let's now consider the larger lesson from this crisis and how it will shape Ukraine's future. This corruption scandal is not just about the actions of a few politicians, it's a reflection of a system that has long struggled to overcome its own dysfunction. Ukraine finds itself at a crossroads, and the decisions made in the coming weeks will determine whether it can emerge stronger or falter under the weight of its internal divisions. The battle against corruption is far from over, but this moment serves as a critical reminder for Ukraine to succeed. It must hold its leaders accountable, unite behind a common cause, and reform the systems that have allowed corruption to flourish. The world is watching, and Ukraine's allies are waiting to see whether the nation can turn the tide. Now is the time for true leadership. Will Ukraine rise to the challenge, or will it be consumed by the same forces it has fought so hard to defeat? The choice is in its hands. The fight against corruption isn't just a battle for Ukraine, it's a global fight for democracy, transparency, and accountability. Join the conversation, raise your voice, and demand that the leaders of Ukraine take action. The future of the country, and perhaps the world, depends on it.